Cool. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Good afternoon again. My name is George Stallings, and for those who don't know what we do, we're manufacturer reps. And to understand what a manufacturer rep does, we're not a direct selling sales force. We represent manufacturers in specific verticals, but we act as their technical experts to end users and to distribution. So we are actually sell our products to the distribution network where you buy them from. And the areas of our expertise are personal protective equipment, which we're talking about today: gloves, hand protection, eye protection. But when it gets to the technical side of it, so if we're on a job site and need help with fall protection, anchor point identification and training, that's where we come in. So we don't make the transactional sale, but we help from the technical side of it. When Matt asked me to speak about today, it was what's happening in the workplace with getting supplies. And with the pandemic, there is a massive amount of shortages going on right now. Unfortunately, the news is not talking about it, but you're going to start seeing, if you haven't seen these shortages already, they will start to get visible to you here shortly. So don't yell at your suppliers if you can't get stuff. So the gist of the products and the things, the subjects we're going to talk about today is understanding the supply chain. I think it's important for everyone to understand how your product gets to market. I know everyone thinks they do know how it gets there. There's probably a lot of things I'll tell you today that you probably weren't aware of. And then we're going to go through the segments that are seeing some shortages: hand protection, eye protection, respiratory protection, and then look for ways to strategize around how we can circumvent some of these shortages that are happening in the supply chain. So let's get started. Even if your product's made in the United States, maybe some segment of that is imported. So that's what the shipping channels look like as of this weekend. The green are cargo ships. Each other color, the oil and gas business is in that orange, but the green is cargo. And so there's a big problem with getting products right now. From China before COVID, a container of product would take about 4 weeks. Now it's taking 6 to 8 weeks to get product from overseas. And you're saying, well, I buy products from USA, we're only USA. Well, most of those subcomponents that you buy from that are manufactured in the United States are now coming from an overseas supplier in some way, shape, or form. So in the case of our fall protection line, 85% of our products are made in the United States, but we still look at subcomponents. Maybe it's a spring, maybe it's a D-ring. That product may come from China. And so putting that final product together, I may have some supply issues. So we are in a global market when it comes to supply chain. So keep that in mind. And what the overall message I have, I gave the same talk to the ASSP last week to safety professionals, is make sure you're engaged in the supply process. Every company operates differently in how they acquire the products they need to protect their workers. But if safety is not involved in some way, shape, or form, that's a mistake. I'll give an example of what my wife experienced. My wife works for a very large oil company, probably the largest oil company in the United States, but I'm not going to mention her name. But just last week, they had a massive recall of hand sanitizer. And the safety person was not involved in that process except for when it came time to recall it. The purchasing made a massive buy of hand sanitizer that was methanol based. And that's a problem for people in their hands. It's flammable. So purchasing had no idea that's what they were buying, but that they bought it and now they had to get rid of it. And that's when safety came into play. Oftentimes I see safety managers, safety directors say to me that they're not involved in the purchasing aspects. I think this is a critical error. I think the safety needs to be at least aware of what's being purchased in the PPE side of it. And this is what we're talking about today. So supply chain. So this may seem generic or elementary to some people, but it's important today to understand that even though someone calls himself a manufacturer, they're truly not a manufacturer, they're a master distributor. So for the purpose of this presentation, what is a manufacturer? A manufacturer is a factory, an entity that takes raw materials and turns them into a final product. Like, so I have a nitrile glove on my hand. So I represent a manufacturer called SW. SW makes nitrile gloves. We are one of the few manufacturers globally of nitrile gloves. Everyone else, if you deal with companies like a PIP or MCR or Cordova or Maggot Glove, those people are not manufacturers. Those people are what we call master distributors. They buy products and maybe private label them, and you believe that they're a manufacturer because their name's on them. That's no different if you walk into a Wegmans or a Whole Foods and you see Whole Foods or Wegmans on your spaghetti. They do not have pasta factories at Wegmans and Whole Foods. They buy them from a pasta factory. They just put their name on. That's called private labeling. And so we see this in fall protection now. There's a lot of people private labeling fall protection. They have no test methods. They have no factories. They just have their name on fall protection. It's a problem, but that's not today. But I just want to everyone to understand when we talk about a manufacturer in this presentation, I'm talking about somebody who takes a raw material, in this case it's NB, and converts it into a nitrile glove. Or somebody who has a factory that makes polycarbonate and turns into safety glasses, or polycarbonate and takes it into a face shield. These are manufacturers. A master distributor, on the other hand, is someone who buys a large amount of product from a manufacturer, private labels it, and or buys a lot of it and resells it to the next tier of distribution. And so when I talk about distribution, there's very large distributors. That's Grainger, Airgas are in our space, in the safety space, are the largest. They sometimes buy from master distributors like a PIP or a Westchester, and other times they're buying from factories. In most cases, you don't know what they're doing. And sometimes they're private label on their own. Grainger has a very large private label brand they call Condor. That doesn't make Grainger a manufacturer. It just makes them a distributor and a master distributor. So a master distributor is one that buys large quantities and redistributes it to the normal distribution network that you would typically buy from. A master distributor in most cases does not sell to end users. They only sell to other distributors. A distributor is someone who buys a product from a manufacturer or a master distributor and sells it to you, the end user. They may or may not, depending on their size, have private label brands. They may or may not import directly themselves. But by and large, they make the final transaction to the end user. And so these lines of manufacturing are being convoluted today. And so people are losing sight on who does what. And as a manufacturer rep, I understand it. I've been involved at every level of the distribution supply chain in my past. So I can clearly understand who's doing what, but a lot of times when I talk to safety managers and safety directors, they're very confused at who they're buying from. And it's critical today, especially with respiratory protection and hand sanitizers and hand protection, who you're truly buying from. Are you buying from a manufacturer? Are you buying from a master distributor? And the reason that's critical is, especially when it comes to performance, when you're looking for a declaration of conformity, if it's ANSI, you want to make sure that you're going to see it's coming to the manufacturer that submitted the product to the lab to be tested. And so that's why it's important for you to understand the supply chain. So if anybody has any questions anytime to Matt, I can take questions and stop at each section, but any questions with regards to supply chain and what they do and how they do it? Okay, good. So what are the shortages happening right now? This is the biggest right now, and this is the one that's not being talked about on the news. News you see a lot with respiratory protection, but nitrile gloves, massive shortages. And I just got an update today. I'll tell you about the end on what's happening in this market. The raw material is the NBR, nitrile butadiene rubber. The NBR comes in liquid form to a factory like SW. And in our factory, we have these massive vats that are a mile long, and they have hand formers, something that looks like a hand. And those hand formers get dipped into the liquid NBR, and that forms a glove, a nitrile glove. So what's happening there? The manufacturers of the raw material, the NBR, are reducing the amount of allocation the factories like an SW get. We're down at 60% of what we would normally receive in a normal market of raw material. And right now, our demand is 4 to 5x of what it was before COVID. The largest market in the world for nitrile gloves is the United States and was the United States. Unfortunately, new markets are coming online, like a little group called Europe. The United States has used a lot more nitrile than Europe ever did. Now, post-pandemic, Europe is using a ton more of nitrile gloves. And where we were buying pre-COVID, a supplier would buy a case for around $25 a case for nitrile. Now it's in the neighborhood of $105 a case. So the prices are going up substantially. Look at our raw material costs in the second bullet. We were paying $980 per metric ton of NBR, and now the price is at $3,200 per metric ton. That pricing is going to go up 30% in a week in October, and an additional 15% what we're seeing in November. So now you're going to be in a $4,000 metric ton just for the base product, raw material, NBR. Labor shortages are massive. The country that makes the most nitrile gloves is Malaysia, and then China, and then you have some sub-countries after that, maybe Taiwan, that come online, and Vietnam. But the biggest producer in the world is a company called Top Glove, and they're out of Malaysia. They're experiencing some massive labor shortages. Believe it or not, most of the people in the Malaysian factories are not Malaysian. They're from India. And when they had COVID increase there, they shut off the supply of labor. And so the factories had to continue whatever Malaysians they were employing, whether they wanted to come to work or not. They had to spread those workers out, and so they have some big labor increases. The demand was there, increased substantially. Like I said, about 6x on demand increase for nitrile gloves globally because of the new markets and usage. And the finished product right now, like I just said, we're looking about 5 times higher today than it was in February for a case of gloves. Then the problem of the shipping has come into play as well with gloves. Takes us a lot longer to get a container available. Chinese New Year is going to be a big problem come January. The Chinese manufacturing base shuts down for 3 weeks during Chinese New Year. So if you're looking for product to ship in January, you might want to ask that it get moved up if it can be moved up, or start ordering your stuff now for your demand. It's going to be crazy. They go on the holiday for 3 days next week. Actually, it's 4 days, the 1st through the 5th. So it's 3 working days. The China will be shut down for a holiday, national holiday. So that creates problems as well. So we have a perfect storm of price increases. And by the way, that the last time I did this presentation, the pricing on the NBR is being pushed up artificially by the factories, the raw material manufacturers. They're pushing it higher and cutting supply down to keep the price high. Their hopes are that they can raise enough money to build new factories to make NBR. So there is really no need to push that price higher, but those factories making the NBR are doing that. And so that rolls downhill. So typical market mechanism would be is demand rises, prices rise, then the factories can have enough, start making investments and new arrivals come to the market to take advantage of those higher prices, and they build more capacity. The folks who are making the NBR are trying to do that backwards. They're trying to raise prices super high so they have money in the bank then to invest if and when they feel that the demand is going to stay high. And so they're banking a lot of cash right now. So they are the ones creating this nitrile shortage in addition to the increased demand. So what's affected in this nitrile thing? People think it's just the nitrile gloves and may tell me I don't use nitrile gloves. So it is single-use nitrile, latex, and vinyl gloves. It is also these cut-resistant gloves that we all, I see Bob Hinderleiter on there. A lot of construction companies require cut-resistant gloves. That black on this cut-resistant gloves is nitrile. And so it's affecting that as well. And so you're going to see your prices and your supply go higher on these gloves. So if you do have a need for cut-resistant gloves and they're nitrile dipped, and that's 90% of the market, you're going to see big price increases and big problems with supply. I will tell you, every purchasing person you talk to is saying, we have no problems, we have no problems. And then all of a sudden they're going to say they have problems, and they will have problems, I promise. So that's going to affect cut-resistant gloves. So how do we solve the problem on hand protection? One, if we are using lots of nitriles, we have to ask ourselves, do we have to use all those nitriles? Two, if we're using a lot of nitriles, can we sanitize them? Can we clean them and use them over again? Now, if you're using these gloves for biohazard, the answer is no. But if you use them just for keeping your hands clean, the answer is yes. In fact, we have a paper that shows you how you can sanitize a glove like this. I can put hand sanitizer on it. That's things that SW does with our hand protection. We're a factory, so we can test our gloves for that hand sanitizer and see if there's breakdown. So we can give you exact data on that and tell you that you can put hand sanitizer on our gloves and it's not going to hurt the nitrile at all. So we do know that, but that's up to each individual manufacturer to tell you how to care for their gloves. So you can wash this glove. Another way is you can use a glove that has features like we use cotton flocking in some of our gloves. So I can take this glove on and off and it doesn't break, and so I can reuse it again. Again, I'm stressing this. If you're dealing with biohazard, that's not what you want to do. If I'm dealing with bloodborne pathogens, this glove has to be discarded. But if it's grease, oils, and stuff like that, see, I can put it back on and use it over again, and I can sanitize it. Those are ways we want to do that. Purchasing folks tend to drive pricing low in an effort to say that, look, a glove is a glove. In the hand protection business and the nitrile business, that is simply not true. The thinner glove and the cheaper gloves will break. We find that people throw out about 40% of the gloves they put on their hands, especially in the single-use space, because they break. And so really, what are you buying? You're buying cheap because you're hoping that since we go through 6,000 pairs a week of gloves, therefore my goal has to be buy cheap. That may not be your goal. Your goal should be buy better and cut your demand down by half or a lot more than half. Maybe you're going to 2/3 because you're buying a proper glove. So that's another way to do it. So buy alternatives or products that can deal with hazards, abrasions, and stuff like that better. And they're not all the same. So I'm really asking safety managers to sit down, park a glove is a glove is a glove mentality, and start looking for features and benefits and things that your real hazards are. So like I say here in the thing, order gloves that hold up. Cheap is not better. It simply isn't. You're just wasting more. And we are working on new polymers now because of the pricing is getting super high. SW is opening up a new line. We're going to have a glove that's going to blend one other synthetic rubber with nitrile to cut down on the amount of nitrile. But we believe we're going to have the same chemical resistance, abrasion resistance, and feel and function as nitrile. So that will come online in October. The market won't see it probably till January, but we're excited about that. So that's where innovation comes into play, because that's the whole thing with supply and demand. As that pricing starts to get real high up there, that means that new innovations can now become affordable. And that's where we're going to see some new products come into play. So you should see that in January. How long will this shortage in the nitrile market persist? 18 to 24 months. Like I said, the information I got yesterday, we're seeing 30% increase in nitrile itself, and finished products 30% in October, 15% in November. And they said big problem's going to be January and February because of Chinese New Year. That's shipping and availability of product at the New Year. If we see an uptick in COVID-19, you're going to see an uptick in pricing and availability and a downtick in availability. It's just reality. What's going to happen? Eye protection. Eye protection is a pretty unique situation right now, and it's really polycarbonate we're playing with. Everybody's out there now wearing these things, face shields, and they're wearing the respiratory protection. That is driving the demand for this higher. And some of you on the call know that we represent cask helmets. And to give you an example of demand, just demand alone, cask helmet comes with a face shield or a visor that acts as eye protection. Last year, we sold 3,000 units in the United States. Today, our backlog is 18,000 units. That's our backlog on face shields. So that's 6x demand, not sales. So that's our backlog of things that people already sold. So it's going up because of COVID. And so this polycarbonate is harder to get now. The price is rising up. Even in safety glasses, what's happening in the safety glass world is getting harder to buy A safety glass that doesn't fog up. And so anti-fog has become the new in vogue product. People are wearing face coverings. When you wear a face covering, I'm sure everybody on the call knows that you start to fog up your glasses. And so this is becoming a massive shortage is fog resistant anti-fog glasses. So not only is a polycarbonate a problem, so is the anti-fog. So that's going to drive prices up as well. Again, just like the single-use gloves, I stress looking for a quality that the glasses can last longer, they're more comfortable, they're lighter, and they perform better as opposed to looking for price. You'll find a low price, but then you're throwing these things away 2, 3 times a week. That doesn't make sense to the bottom line, and it doesn't make sense from a safety standpoint because if it does fog up on me, the worker can't see through the glass. It's a big problem. So these trip, slip, and fall and have other issues, or they don't wear their eye protection at all because it doesn't work. They can't see through it, and then you have a whole other issue with eye protection. So again, I believe this is where the quality conversation comes up. Start buying smart as opposed to buying cheap. We love to be the best buyer in a room sometimes, and I think that's counterproductive when it comes to getting the right product for your employees. Again, what's driving that? More trades are using eye protection. If you go into a McDonald's, a Chipotle, a Wawa, they're wearing glasses now. They never wore glasses. And so that's creating a massive new demand for safety glasses. Your people in healthcare, we just sold 10,000 pair to the University of Pennsylvania hospital system of foam lined glasses because everyone in that place is wearing glasses now. When before the folks receiving patients never wore safety glasses. Only the doctors were doing, and the nurses who were around the bloodborne pathogens were wearing safety glasses. Not anymore. Everyone is. So that just pushed up massive demand. And again, shipping. I'm going to say shipping every time I get to every one of these bullet points. Freight from overseas is big. It's taken up time. 4 weeks, and now I'm at 6 to 8 weeks of getting a new product in. How do we solve those problems? Plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead. Talk to your suppliers. Respiratory protection. So respiratory protection, everyone knows about N95s and KN95s. It looks like we're finally getting to the point where the KNs are being outlawed in the workplace, which is great. They don't meet NIOSH. And there was a bunch of articles. I put one on LinkedIn yesterday about they're finding out that KNs, even the ones that say they're KN certified, aren't even meeting the KN standard. That's the Chinese, for those who don't know, the Chinese standards. Very dangerous product. It won't be approved from a respiratory standpoint. It's not necessarily dangerous if you're using it for COVID protection. But if you go ahead and put that in your workforce and expect it to work like an N95, it will not. But the good news is the market is kind of stabilized. Pricing's still extremely high on N95s. Lead times are about 22 weeks. If I was to place an order for N95s to an American factory today, I'm looking at about 22 weeks of supply side. P100 cartridges. I always suggested early on in COVID that if you're in the workplace and you're looking for respiratory protection, to move to an APR, a half face respirator that is a P100 cartridge. One, they're going to be more protected. Two, they last a lot longer than an N95. N95s you're throwing away 2-3 times a day. We sell a respirator that can last up to 30 days on one cartridge. So it's really finding the right respiratory protection, and you can save money as opposed to putting everybody in N95. That's going to be hard to find. Those shortages of P100 cartridges are going to end up freeing up in October, November time period. And so if you're using a PAPR or an APR, you'll start seeing more supply stabilize in about 30 days, which is great news. The shortage of everything will end this year. So I think that the factories, the USA factories, will be able to get up to speed on P100s here shortly, and you'll see that N95 start to stabilize. I don't think you're going to see the pricing stabilize. I think that you're still going to see prices drive up in the respiratory protection side. I firmly believe that you need to look at how you're protecting people from a respiratory standpoint and move people. Frankly, if they're in an N95 anyway, you have to give them a fit test. So why not put them in a half face respirator? They're still having to go through the NIOSH protocols for respiratory protection on N95. So your long run, you're saving money with an APR than a half mask N95. So what's our strategies for success? As I said in the beginning, safety management must be part of the procurement process. I understand if some organizations say my safety manager is my safety manager, my procurement department is my procurement department. I get that you want to separate the two for various reasons. However, what I disagree with is that safety, whether it's the safety person's comfort level or it's the hierarchy of the company, either way, the safety management needs to be involved. At least if you're not involved in procurement, you need to be involved in spec writing. So no matter what it is, you just say, this is the minimum performance we're going to accept, and to hand that spec to purchasing to go buy on that spec or that manufacturer that you choose. But taking a hands-off approach to this and saying, I don't do the buying, I just do the safety, is irresponsible. And I think that you need to take a step back and say, what are we buying? Because at the end of the day, if it fails, it's going to be on your lap as a safety professional, just like it was at my wife's factory or the lab that they work in. That hand sanitizer had to be picked up by the safety professional, even though he decided he wasn't going to be part of the process. His decision. And he was wrong. And now he has to clean it up. And he should have all along said, if we're going to bring hand sanitizer into this facility, it has to meet this standard. And if we can't get the standard that I spec'd in, let's talk about alternatives. And these are alternatives that we can supply and buy. So I think that that's critical that safety professionals start to understand supply chain, start understanding what the specs are. And that goes hand in hand with what the ANSI standards say, what NIOSH is doing, and what the manufacturers say. No matter what the presentation I give, I always say to people, read your instructions, no matter what it is. Take 5 minutes to read the instructions to say what that product can and can't do. Manufacturers and the safety management should have a relationship with the manufacturer. Notice I said manufacturer. In addition, a relationship with your distributor. Because when purchasing can't get something, you should be able to pick up the phone and call someone. I've always professed this. The people I work with, I always have direct relationships with my end users that care to have a relationship with the manufacturers. I think it's important. I think it's a strategic advantage. Sometimes the distributor may not know how to solve that problem, and your manufacturer does. And then it's good for you to be able to pick up that phone and solve that problem and help your distributor get past it. Distribution must be part of your equation. You must have a distribution partner you can count on. I know the philosophy of a lot of purchasing departments is put it out for bid and let's see who lands at the lowest. That's great when everyone stocks something. It's a terrible plan when no one stocks something. So you better pick 1 or 2 partners that are going to stock your stuff for you and hold them accountable. I don't like 3, 4, or 5 suppliers. It's bad news for you. Yeah, you get the best price, but you're waiting. And a good example is that I was out asking someone on pricing on respiratory yesterday. They told me a manufacturer has the best price in the market, but you can't get the product, right? So what good is if they can't deliver? How great is that low price if you can't deliver? You have to think about that. So distribution is an absolute critical component for you to get the PPE that you need to keep your jobs going. And I say this to distributors all the time, and I'm sure it's going to ring true to everybody on this phone call. It's funny that the rebar, the wire mesh, the light gauge steel, your iron workers could be on that job site, but that job site does not run if there's not a hard hat there or a helmet. Simple as that. Today, especially in the DC and Baltimore markets, no job gets started without the personal protective equipment. You can expand that to gloves, vests, and glasses, right? It's amazing that all the raw materials that make that building could be there, and we don't have the PPE today. We can't operate our job site. So having a relationship with your distributors is critical. Quality and performance absolutely will beat low pricing every day, time and time again. I don't know how many times we go out and go low bid and it fails us, and it will fail you eventually. Use supply chain relations for alternative and expect the key PPE shortages. And that's critical. There's always another pivot point we can come to on our PPE, and that's where you can work with your distribution and work with your manufacturer. Okay, I can't get nitrile, but what can I get today? Can I use latex? I don't want to use latex because I have allergies. Well, how many people really on your team have allergies? Can I use vinyl? There's another product called TPE that's out there for hand protection. Can I get that? So that is think about your pivots if you're having supply chain issues, and that's where you have relationships with manufacturers and have relationships with distribution. And then finally, you have to plan. What's our jobs look like? What's our backlog look like? What are we going to need on the job sites? and it is not a trait often shared by construction companies as planning. I know that it's a yesterday business, but today in the pandemic, if you want it to work properly, we can get you the products, but we need to know what's happening ahead of time. And really, that's people want to talk about everything being a unprecedented. I think all that can be circumvented if we have a plan and we work the plan and we work our relationships. And if you hold people accountable in your relationships and you have good relationships, you can get through this as long as you communicate. So, Matt, I hope I delivered what you wanted to. I tried to keep it to about 30 minutes. And the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, any questions? I mean, that was really great. It's eye-opening for me. I mean, I kind of thought I knew some of what the distribution looked like, but you definitely opened my eyes there. And to bring your point, I can't tell you how many times I've had to pick up the phone because somebody couldn't get a supply, and you pick up the phone and talk to the people you've been working with for a while, and yeah, I can get you a case to get you by. Starts to happen, and they'll open up their pockets when they're in the pinch. That's for sure. And the few pennies they saved earlier, it'll cost them in the long run if they don't have those relationships. So I definitely support what you said there, 110%.
And it's amazing if you have you are loyal to people, they'll be loyal to you at the end of the day. That's been true in my life. So if you've been loyal to a distributor and you've been fair to them, they're going to jump through hoops to keep your business and do whatever they can to keep you happy.
That's 100%. So any questions for him? What is it that makes a KN95 inferior according to 3M? I just lost that. Where'd it go? According to 3M safety, they were considered generally equivalent. That was a question that just came in.
Yeah, so the KN95 doesn't meet NIOSH. It hasn't been through the NIOSH protocols. And I don't know if you, there was an article I read for the Philadelphia Inquirer yesterday about these KNs hitting the market. They don't meet our initial protocols in the United States. So I said, that's my number one thing. They don't meet NIOSH. And so you can't have respiratory protection being used in the workplace unless it's NIOSH, first and foremost. Secondly, there's a lot of copy KN95s coming in because they don't have to meet a standard. And so they can just stamp KN. It's just like ANSI on fall protection. Anybody can write ANSI on it. Doesn't mean they meet it. So there's a problem with that supply chain on KNs. You can use them if it's your family. There's no issues with putting them on your kids. They filter something. But if you use them in a workplace and you have a protocol for respiratory protection, it has to meet NIOSH. Nobody can sell a respirator in the United States unless it meets NIOSH.
Thank you. And I know a lot of people got in trouble because, of course, government and everybody else was asking for construction companies to empty some of their stockpiles to help the medical people. So they did. And now we're seeing people with bandanas around their face and stuff like that again because they can't get some of these, N95 exactly. respirators and stuff. So
that's right. It's freeing up a little bit. And again, that's where you have to have the right supply chain. You're going to be able to get some N95s now. So that part of the emergency is not as bad as it was. It's not like gloves.
Right. Other questions? You can throw them in the chat box real quick. If not, we will. Are there any issues with hand sanitizer stockpiles? Another question came in.
There is. FDA has a list of 150 companies that are recalled. 150 manufacturer hand sanitizer that is being recalled by the FDA. I love the alternatives. Now, to be upfront, I represent an alternative, a company called R&R Lotion. Ours is not alcohol based. It is FDA approved in the medical community, so we sell a lot of it to the medical community. But the CDC's recommendation is that it has to have alcohol. I think 70% alcohol is their baseline. Whereas if you're in the medical field, alcohol really dries your skin and has a lot of skin health issues. So we're clear for medical, and I have a lot of construction companies buying it. So yes, there is a shortage of legal hand sanitizers. It's benzoyl. I'm not good with the chemical name. It's BZK is the name of the material that we put on. I think Bill just popped up in the chat. It's BZK that we're using. There's a few of us that use BZK. It's been around for years. It's a phenomenal product. It's just not alcohol based, but it does a tremendous job against, the illnesses and it hasn't been passed against COVID, but the CDC is not giving that guidance. So
Gotcha.
FDA, it is FDA approved.
Okay. Any other questions? How can I get a list of recalls for the hand sanitizers?
I will send it to Matt. It is on the FDA website, but I'll send Matt a link
Okay.
after this is over, and Matt can send it to everybody else. It's a hot link on this letter, and it grows every day. There's just so many people decided to get into the hand sanitizer business and don't know that methanol is not good.
Yeah, we started seeing it come in motor oil cans and everything else. That was a bit crazy. That's for sure.
It is. It is. And like I said, big companies are buying this stuff foolishly. You know, they're not involving their safety professionals. Even their hygienists aren't involved in this buy, which is mind blowing to me.
Right. All right. Well, we'll post that link to the C Inc Online website. Same thing. We'll post a link to this video. And we have tomorrow. We have our final session. That's going to be Osh, Mosh, and Vosh, and they're going to be at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll have all three of them to talk about their deal, especially Virginia with their Virginia-specific COVID standard that everybody has to comply with. If you weren't on with Brad Hammock, we hope to have that up by next week, but he talked a lot about that standard as well. So we appreciate you all coming out. We appreciate you being part of this. And again, I want to thank George for taking out some time and letting us know about this. I think it was a great job, and we're happy to have you. So thanks a lot. Anybody, anything else or any wrap ups? Bill, Bob, anybody? All right, then I
Thanks,
will.
Matt. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a great day. Be careful. Be safe.
Thank you.